Well, okay. Welcome. So I'm going to go over kind of three topics here that seem to be frequently asked questions, more or less, about Brokermint. Just overall compliance questions that pretty much go hand in hand with Brokermint. And then a few items that are a little aside, just kind of through the 1 to 4 contract, making sure we're in compliance there. And I may even touch if it feels like it's needed with some of the new lingo with Netris that kind of keeps you compliant within the MLS. That's new. So I'll just start with Brokermint. I have several bullet points here that seem to be frequently kind of missed steps. First being I'm going to remind you guys to send in documents for review. So I've found that a lot of agents, which is totally fine if you do this, um, say you have a listing agreement that you want me to review for compliance and for accuracy prior to actually sending to your client. I get a lot of those documents sent to me before there's any signatures on the document from the clients, buyer or seller. That's definitely fine. And I just go ahead and, you can hit submit for review through your whole entire checklist before you send any document. I'm happy to review them. And I try to do that daily on approving documents that are recently submitted to me. But be sure, this is the piece that it seems like we miss occasionally, to go back and submit them for my review again. Even after, primarily, it would be best if you waited until both buyer and seller signed. So I get it the first time before you send it out for signatures. I don't necessarily need it after your client signs, but I do need it once both clients sign. And it's an executed version if all possible. So I have that complete document to review. Um, and then after that, something that I've realized that a lot of us are missing is changing the transaction status. So, most of the time when you're working with let's say, a seller, you have your listing as active. And then, of course, when it goes under contract, or in Brokermint's terms, pending, we have to make sure that we fill in the information that's it prompts you to fill in after you mark it pending. The biggest one is the closing date. I don't believe it actually highlights red for you if you don't put it in there. But if you do not add in the closing date when you're changing a transaction from active to pending in Brokermint, I have no clue when your transaction is closing unless I go back and look at your contract and go to the closing date on, I think, page 5. Which I certainly can do that, and I do that, but it's very inconvenient for me. And then also it helps you, as a realtor too. It definitely helps me to pull up my dashboard and I see that date out to the right-hand side on my list or my pending transactions, because it's sometimes hard to remember, and then you got to go back in your contract and go to that date. So it's just very good practice. Always change it to pending no matter what, because a lot of times I have my settings to look at document transactions that are pending. But always put in the closing date, even if it's not even set. Say it's a new construction, and they said, well, we think it's sometime in May, but it potentially could be June. Great, just put the earliest that it could be. That's how I know when to send out your disbursement agreements, and also, of course, check your documents for compliance to even get to that point. All right. So another good reason to do this, to set your status to pending. And again, I think sometimes, and everyone's guilty of this, we get busy. So we might have it pending for a week or two and it's a 30-day close. So we don't actually go update all this until 10 days out. That's, we can still get your DA done and we can get everything checked off, but it's also not going to highlight your checklist items in red, because those are a default. So the system defaults to the dates that it thinks that it's important to have each item taken care of. So if we're not setting our status to pending, then the system's not going to default and highlight your items on your checklist to red to alert you to get those taken care of in the timely manner that Brokermint sees it as good. So that's another reason to set your transaction pending. I would say immediately after you get that executed contract and you know that option and earnest money have been turned in, so it's a solidified deal, I would go ahead and upload all your executed documents, even upload your receipted page you received from your title company. Put that in there too. That will just be great to keep us on the same track. And I'll know whenever your documents need to be reviewed. And you'll know when you need to have documents complete. Sorry, we just received mail. Okay, that's that item. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I've just got something to add. Those deadlines in Brokermint are deadlines that we set whenever we set up Brokermint as a brokerage to comply with the Texas Real Estate Commission. So that's why they turn red on certain dates. It has everything to do with the Texas Real Estate Commission guidelines and rules. Um, and I just want to, I guess, kind of underline Evan's request here for those pending and the closing dates to be kept up to date because, we all like to get paid, and she is not alerted that you have anything pending or coming up close to a closing date without that closing date being updated. If the closing gets moved forward and you need a DA sooner, all you have to do is change that date, and Brokerment is going to alert Evan that this one is closing next week. The closing just got moved and this one's closing sooner. She's going to get that alert and she'll know to go in there and create that DA for you to get paid.
Yes, and I'll just reiterate with that. We have so many agents and transactions that my screen is actually defaulted to all pending transactions, and I will occasionally go and see what's active. But for the most part, I'm looking at all pending, and I have it in chronological order of what's closing. And so that's very important that it is pending status and with the closing date. And another thing I've found, even if we get to the very end and I just know your transaction's closing next week because I looked on your contract and I have a mental note, or we had an email discussion, and so we never put that closing date in there. Whenever I go to close out your transaction, it's going to want to adjust to that date, not your closing date. And that's a bad situation because that affects more than one layer of compliance. So it's very important to put it in there, even if it's at the very end of your deal, at least put it in there at some point, the closing date, if you guys can. Okay. The next thing with Brokermint, so I don't know, this might be a newer agent deal, and this is totally fine. But I think some agents have had a little bit of difficulty with adding and editing information after you've already sent something for e-sign, and now we're going back. There's multiple ways that you can edit a contract or any document without deleting everything. And I think most of us know this, but you can always add, edit, and the system saves the information. Now, it will ask you if you want to keep the existing signatures and add new, or if you want to avoid all signatures. 9 times out of 10, we're going to keep the existing ones, and then we can go in and strike through and add initial boxes on our changes. But I just wanted to let everyone know that that is done through the Edit e-sign button on Brokermint. And if I need to go in, I can show you guys this. But I just wanted to make a note that you definitely do not need to add a new task. You can either go into the existing contract tab, edit, e-sign your contract, and fill in new signature boxes, whatever you need to do on there. with keeping your existing contract. Every now and then, you might need to unassign a document and you can re upload the fresh copy if that's needed. But usually, we don't have to go and just update and add new tasks for the same thing that we just didn't need to use that one. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've had a few questions with that. Lori, do you have anything to add, or am I making myself very unclear?
No, 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 no. It's good. And any, I would say anything that was agreed and we're maybe adjusting a previous agreement. We need a copy of everything that both parties agreed to. So let's make sure we do keep those in there. So, you can have multiple amendments,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just name them, to kind of clarify what they are. Um, I did want to add to, Evan, I have given you screen sharing permissions. So if you do decide you wanted to pop in and screen share or show anything, you can.
Okay, great. I might have to do that with a couple of these next bullet points. Um, my next thing is unsorting a document and then assigning it to the correct task. Before we do this, I'll just start with it is okay on my end. I'm perfectly fine with if you say you have an agent send you a whole completed package and everything is one packet and it's not separated into the 1 to 4, the third party, the non-realty at all. Um, you can go through and just upload that to the 1 to 4 contract tab and then exempt yourself from the 1 to 4 non-realty in this scenario. Of course, I will know that I need to look at all of it within the 1 to 4 tab. Um, but let's say you're like me and that's just not how your brain likes to work, and you like to know that everything's separated out and accounted for so you're not looking at blank tabs. I'll show y'all real quick how you can quickly unsort that packet that you might have been sent and then put it towards what you need. So I am going to share my screen here. Let's see. Okay, I think we might have a dummy one in here, but I'm trying to think what would be the best way um, to do this. And it may be better that I come back to this in a second, because I don't know. There might be like an unsorted document in here. Yeah. So can y'all see my screen? I think so.
Yep, yep.
Okay. So in this scenario, there's one unsorted document. And how you get a document into the unsorted tab. So I'll show you real quick what I did here. So you're at your residential listing. You're like, oh, okay, well, let's say all these were blank. I just got this whole packet from this agent and I need to upload it. How do I get it to the correct task? Okay, so I go to documents, and here you would just typically upload if you had each, say, amendment. If you had the non-realty, if they were separated, you could just upload them right here into each one, hitting this, like the survey, for instance. But if not, and you got the whole packet, you would click on unsorted, and then you would add the document. And so in this scenario, if it was sent to you, you'd most likely download it as a PDF. So you would upload the file, and then it would put it in the unsorted documents. So in this case, there's one in here, third-party financing addendum. We would want to say this was 10 pages and we had everything in one. What you could do is sort it, and then you would assign it to. So you already have, if you have not hit exempt on all of these, you have the ability to assign it to the task list on the right-hand side over here. And you would simply split it into that. Uh, Now, if you didn't have the checklist item, let's say it was something that's not typical in your listing checklist, um, you could create your task name here. You would just fill it in, and then it would let you save it to it. So I think I kind of got ahead of myself. So splitting a document. So this one you can see is 2 pages. But if it were 20 pages, it was your 1 to 4, your non-realty, your third party. You could come in here and I like to just look at the top and say, okay, well, where is it? And how many pages am I going down to? Well, I'm starting with 1. And then if it was a 1 to 4, we're looking at, I believe it's 11 pages. So the first 11 pages are going to be the 1 to 4 contract. And then I think since this one's already in here, it's not going to let me find it. But it would, once you start typing in 1 to 4, it would populate right here for you to just split it. And then that whole 1 to 4 contract is going into that task. Okay, so then we're back down and we have the third party next. So pages 12 to 13 are going to be the third party. We start typing third party, it would populate, we hit it, and we would assign. Once we went through the entire document we were sent, we would hit split, and it would split them all out. And then you would come back to, at this point, your documents, because now they're sorted, and you would see each one split into your task list item. And then at that point, let's say that was the executed version. I go over here, I hit submit for review. And then you're sending them to me. I go through your listing and I see you have all these beautiful documents sorted out and ready for me to review them step by step. And we're all happy. Okay, so I'll stop sharing for a second, but that's in a nutshell how to receive a document and split it if it's, definitely 3 or 4 different tasks in one. Again, you don't have to do this. You can make a note when you submit your documents on the 1 to 4 tab. Hey, by the way, third party non-realty are all in this same package. And then you can exempt yourself from those task items if you want to. And that's fine. But if you're like me and you want to have it really clean and clear, you can sort them out like that. And another reason I kind of like it, again, as a realtor standpoint, is when I go through and I do that, I'm making a mental checklist of, oh no, I forgot. Like, I need this document signed. Where is it? I sent that to the agent. Why didn't they send it back to me? And that way, I kind of keep a checklist on myself as well. Lori, is there anything you wanted to add to that one? She might have stepped away for a second. And that's fine. We will keep going.
No, I'm here. I couldn't find my unmute button.
Oh.
Lost my unmute button for a minute. No, there's nothing. You're doing great. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, let me keep looking down my notes here. I think we're pretty much done with the Brokermint frequently asked questions. And we're probably going to go over some compliance tidbits real fast. So I did touch base on always submitting the signed copies. We already went over that, but that's a big one. I would say that's actually the most important. And this happens, and a lot of times it just happens because, you get caught up in the transaction and you just forget to hit that button. So hitting submit for review is very important to do so you can actually get checked for compliance on a routinely basis. So if there is something wrong, we can get that taken care of way before it's time to send out the DA. So this is kind of probably going to be a newer agent question, but I remember having this exact thought whenever I was new. But who executes what? So I used to think, as I worked primarily with buyers, that, oh, okay, well, the listing agent, she's just going to execute, or he's going to execute this contract because that's the listing agent's job. Well, I mean, most time it probably is if you submit a clean contract that's already agreed upon and there's no changes made, and it's your buyer signs, their seller signs, it's done, right? Well, it seems like it doesn't happen like that too often, or at least not lately. So we get a bunch of, oh, but we need to change this, and then we're good to go. Okay, well, let me initial that, strike through your client initials. And then we forget who actually needs to execute the contract and get that sent to title. So that can be either the buyer's agent or the listing agent. A lot of times I have the question, well, I don't know who the title rep or the title escrow officer is because it's the other agent that picked the person because their client's paying for the title policy. Um, a lot of times with that, I will just shoot it back over. I'll execute it. I'll do all of that. And then I'll send it to the other agent and say, I'm not real sure exactly who I'm emailing. Do you want to make the introduction? And I send it their way. Or I say, what is the email address? I'd be happy to send this out to all parties since we have an executed copy. So at that point, my main point to hit on is whoever's going to receive the contract last does need to execute it. And then also, and Lori, make sure I'm not overstepping or saying this incorrectly. Um, the day that it comes in is the date that it's executed. Even if you went to sleep at 10:30, the contract came back to you fully signed at 10:45. You woke up and saw it at 8 a.m. It is executed for the day that it came in on fully signed, correct, Lori? Not the day that we truthfully, we received it on, say, the 15th. We woke up on the 16th. It's executed on the 15th.
It's assumed received when it was emailed. Yes.
Okay. And that's highly important for, option period, how soon the earnest money's due, all that good stuff. Okay, that was that question that I seem to get quite a bit. And I think we're all pretty clear on, once you receive a fully executed contract, your earnest money and option money is due. That's day 0. So if it was executed today on Tuesday, today's 0, 1, 2, 3 days, it would be due on Wednesday, Friday at 5. If it ever falls on a weekend, it's going to be due the next business day, weekend or holiday. But the weekend and the holiday counts in your option period as days. I think sometimes that's also a little bit misleading. If you have a 10-day option, you execute a contract on Tuesday, you count out 10 days at 5 o'clock. But if any of those days are weekends or holidays, those are counting as your day. And an option period can end on a Sunday. So you might be working, during that time that you think you have off. So that's always a great thing that new agents need to realize. The crucial, time crunch that we can be in. That's about all I have on compliance issues. I was going to also go over the commission placement on the 1 to 4. Everyone is doing this super duper good, so I'm really not trying to talk to anyone here. I was just going to make a clear and concise statement. If you have your listing, if you're working with a buyer and you know that you're getting BAC at 3% from the other broker because they have that, let's just say 6% deal signed with their client, you are not putting anything on paragraph 12 unless you are getting a credit for repairs or something else. That's 12C. But if you're just doing standard commission, that's going to go on page 10 of the contract as a disclosure purposes only. Make sure it is in there so the title company, the lender, everybody has that it's disclosed is on the contract. That's actually not binding. Lori, again, please tell me if I'm wrong here. You need to have the broker to broker 2402 signed. So if you're getting paid any compensation whatsoever from broker to broker, it does not go in 12. It goes on page 10, disclosure only. And then you also have the broker to broker signed, and please upload that as well to your Brokermint file. Now, let's say you are going to get paid compensation directly from the seller as, like as part of the closing costs coming out of the seller's pocket directly. That's when you do put that on 12A, 1B, I believe. And that's to pay you directly from the seller. And you can have both. And they can be stacked. So let's say you do know you're receiving 2.5% and you work for 3% and you're going to try and cover that extra half. You can still ask for that as additional compensation directly from the seller. So you would then have 2.5 and 12 I'm sorry, 0.5% in 12, 2.5 down on your disclosure with the broker to broker signed at 2.5. And then you would actually be receiving 3%. Lori, did I explain that correctly?
You did great.
Okay, perfect. All right. Good morning. So that's really everything I have on the commission. And then the last piece is Netris, new lingo. And I know Kelly, you're probably not a member of Netris, and that's sorry. um, but I do think there's quite a few people that are going to potentially review this video, and they might want to know this information. And I'm sure they do know this information actually, because we've done a great job of getting it to them. Um, but just kind of a quick, brief update and really a reminder. If you're a Waco agent or even a Dallas agent, you just kind of be reminded that there's multiple steps once you're under the under contract phase that you'll want to change your status to during that whole entire time, depending on what the terms are of your contract. Because they have active, pending, active option, active contingent, and active kickout, and they all mean different things. And honestly, I probably won't go through all of what these mean, but we're used to just going from active to pending to closed. We're not used to all these other ways, or even, well, I guess active contingent was an option too. But the active contingent is different than what it used to be that we were used to. We thought active contingent was when the buyer had to sell their home, and that meant it was contingent, which that is true. But in Netris, it's actually meaning that it's contingent based on financing and inspections. So if you're a Waco agent and you see that it's marked active contingent, that was used to be more pending for us. That just meant it seemed like it was a solid deal. There was nobody selling a house. Um, that was just normal. Well, now when we do that active contingent, that means that they have a financing addendum signed, which is 9 times out of 10 the case. And there might still be doing inspections and negotiating all of that. So that to me is the biggest point as a Waco area agent, is to know that that's not meaning what it used to mean when it was active contingent. And then also knowing as a listing agent to go in and still change your status to pending as you get through all these other options during the active under contract period. Okay. That is, in a nutshell, pretty much what I had marked of common kind of issues. Not really issues. Nobody's really having issues. I feel like everyone does it pretty well. So um, this was more of a kind of like a reminder and a here or there. Oh, yeah, this question. But that's about it.
Can you go over really quick, and this may take a screen share, how to create a new transaction? Let's say I have a buyer and they make an offer on this house, they have their inspection, they decide that's not going to work for them, so we terminate it. And now that buyer is going to make an offer on another house. Can you go through the correct way to get that done?
Sure. Yes, that's a great question. Okay, I'm going to screen share. Okay, I'm just going to go in and create a transaction, and we'll just do it buyer facing. So we're going to represent the buyer, and usually, and this is maybe a great time to touch on this as well. As a buyer, and let's say that you know you don't have like an active time period necessarily like you would with a listing as active to pending, but you do usually go pending. So I like to list it as opportunity if I don't have the buyer rep agreement signed yet. Let's say I just had the phone call with them and I'm working on the whole deal. I will leave it as opportunity. And then whenever I have the buyer rep agreement, I switch it to active, because once they find the house and I'm working on a contract, that's more or less going to become pending because that's the one they want. That's how I do it. Now, I'm not really too concerned what you're doing on your end between opportunity and active. As long as it's switched to pending once it's under contract, that's the main concern for me to know what I need to be doing for you. So in this case, I will just go ahead and mark it as active because we're saying that we have a contract going, so they must have a buyer rep agreement signed. We'll just see what I have to put in here real fast. We'll do residential. We'll just do well, this would need a yard sign. Okay. And this is another deal. I guess we can go ahead, and this is great that we're doing this. So since you're representing the buyer, you don't necessarily know what the total amount is going to be because you're not representing, the listing agents would know this, but you may not know this. So it's okay if they've already told you you're receiving a buyer agent commission of 3%, you can put 3 here. And then the listing side right now, we're not sure if we were creating this from scratch. If you did know who they were, you could go ahead and put that in there, but it's not a huge concern. But 3% here, and then you would want to add yourself. So you can go ahead and knock all this out. I'll just add myself to this and hit next. And then buyer and buyer client. I have found that this populates like this often for people. If you had 2 people buying the house, you could go ahead and do buyer and buyer client with the husband and wife's name here. If it's just one person's name, you can just do it under buyer or buyer client. I don't think it's actually going to let you yeah, you can't. So it would need to be the same person if there's only one person. I don't know. So he's missing his email. I think it's going to do that again. All right. Filling that in. And then here we go. So this kind of dates back to a couple months ago when we automated checklists. So hopefully this is doing this for everyone. But since I put in that I was representing a residential client and he was going to be a buyer, it automatically knows that my checklist is residential buyer. But let's say you needed to add something to this, you certainly can. Or if it defaulted to the wrong one for whatever reason, you can uncheck it and then you should be able to check the correct one. So if I already knew this information, this would be a great time to put this in here. Because Lori, I think the scenario you were giving me was that maybe we already had a contract or something, they backed out, and now I need my documents to go on to the next listing or next home they're going to buy.
Yeah, and I've got an active buyer agent. If you wanted to pop over into mine and use that, you
Okay.
could.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll do that
Okay.
one. And so that was kind of a few items there that maybe would have helped with that test. But if you want to give me who that is,
It's Gonzalez, Jessica and Johnny Gonzalez.
oops, if I could spell correctly, that would find it. This one?
And you can
No,
grab any one of those. Yeah, we had a couple of them so far already. So you can grab any one of those and just do 123 test as the address and
got it.
kind of
So
be able
you're
to show
talking
that.
about copying the documents from, say, this.
Right, right. Because their
Okay.
buyer rep agreement is in there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right there. So multiple ways you could do this. If you didn't want to create a copy, you don't have to. If you wanted to download this, you say you only had these 2 things, you could go over here, download them, and it would download to your desktop, and you could re-upload them if you wanted to in a new file, and you could just tell me, hey, cancel this one. You could do it like that, and I've had people do it that way. Or you could go over here and edit. And since this one's already canceled, you're only seeing reopen and create a copy. You would actually probably see more options than this, but create a copy is going to be one of them. So you would just go and create the copy, and you want to select whatever's in red so you can move forward. So they're probably going to be active now because you just canceled that contract. Maybe you don't have another one yet. And then you would hit next and you would choose the documents you want to carry over. So probably going to be the buyer rep and the information about brokerage services. If you had a referral, maybe one of those, but it doesn't look like this one's that case. It should populate what you had here, and you can just keep hitting next. And then, of course, you have your contacts. Looks like everything in there is great. And then checklists. And so maybe you already did have another contract that you were ready to start working on, and you could fill in this information if you knew it. But if not, here you go. And you're creating a new deal with a blank. All your stuff is blank. And let me double check. Did it put it in the unsorted? Yeah. So I'll go back real slow on how that worked out. So since we copied and created a new transaction, it's going to give you, which is the beauty of this, a blank task list, because now you can see what you don't have checked off. But you can also see that, previously we did check that we wanted the IBS and the buyer rep to transfer, and it doesn't look like they're uploaded here. That's because they're in the unsorted documents. So to receive those or retrieve those, you would go to documents and then unsorted. And here's where we'll use what we learned earlier about sorting things out and assigning them to their correct task. So the buyer rep, you're going to want to, you can assign it directly to, because it's already sorted. So we don't necessarily need to split it. So we can just assign it directly to that task item, which is right here. And then now we're on the IBS again. We don't need to sort it, so we can assign it directly. Where is that? Am I missing it? There it is. Okay, so nothing's left in our unsorted right now. We go back to our checklist, and now they're crossed through and uploaded. Again, if you wanted to, this would be a time to submit for review, because you got 2 documents in there. And then there you go. So now you have your same people that you're not having to redo all of that with the commission amounts and all those things. You don't have to reassign all these names to what tasks they do. You just have to create the copy and check the documents you want to copy. They will go to your unsorted folder, and you can assign them to the correct tasks. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions?
That was good. You did that way better than I did. I stumbled through it whenever I did it. And that's what I was thinking, oh, I bet people need this.
Well, I personally love Brokermint. Once you get it, you kind of get it, and it's really easy, and it's, to me, the best. So
You don't have to go anywhere else for your documents or your signatures or anything. It's just all right there. It makes it easy. And the checklists are easy too. Because like you said, I can go through there and see, oh, wait, I haven't done this yet.
yes, I love that feature. Love it. Well, I don't have anything else on my end, so I'm always happy to help. Feel free to email me if you run across any questions, or if you even want to set up a quick tutorial of Brokermint, I can do that too. And yeah, so I'm always available through email, and extension 5, if you call the office, that comes to me as well. And I'd be happy to help you.
Thanks, Evan. This is very helpful.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining in, Kelly.
This was awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. All righty. Well, y'all have a great rest of the week.
Bye.
Bye.